Hey everyone, I just wanted to come on with a really quick kind of reminder message for you guys that's coming through really clearly for me today. And as it has like frequently, right, this is a perennial theme. And probably, there's a good portion of people who maybe still haven't really thought too deeply about it, even if it's going to seem obvious once I say it. But let's just think about the difference between, let's get philosophical for a second here because everything is being versus appearance, right? We hear a lot of talk about like pattern recognition and people assuming that that's the same thing as intuition, and there's some overlap but it's not the same at all. And I just want to insert that into this discussion in a second here. There's a difference between truth and the way that truth can appear. So, which is always the case, right? We never really have like raw access to some kind of like raw, pure truth, right? Truth is always subject to the conditions for its appearance or for its cognition or for however we are relating to it. So, and I just find this is even fascinating, right? This is not like a cause for skepticism. That's not, definitely not my angle here. This is not to say something like you can't believe anything you see or, believe anything. Like, it's not saying that there's no truth. It's just saying that there's this additional quality of truth that it's going to embed itself within or be influenced by or take on the conditions that really form the constraints for it to appear at all. So now you're thinking, okay, Shannon, whatever, all this philosophy stuff, right? Like, so what, right? So many things, right? This is like so important because so many times this is why we will get into traps where we can feel like our mind is deceiving us, or are we just gaslighting ourselves, or is this, how do I believe what I believe? Like, can I trust when I believe what I believe or see? And there are a couple of really interesting accounts of truth which kind of describe it as like an opening into a system. So for example, like you've got a set of assumptions, you've got a system, you're working with a framework, and by definition, really, it's based on certain assumptions, right? It's not infinite. There are choices that were made to construct a certain framework. And on some accounts, truth is really like when that framework kind of, there's like a little opening, like, or a place where it doesn't work, or it falls apart, or there's like a hole. And then that's where more truth can come in, so to speak. And I think I mentioned too in a couple of like definitely super abstract video, I gave you guys a content warning that it was abstract. I was talking about truth in context of being a kind of like infinitely dense state space. And I think that's kind of a really cool way to think about it. Truth is like this infinitely rich, that's how I mean dense, rich infinity. And so, of course, it's not going to fit into any kind of presentation that we can access with our 3D perception in a human body. And so a really great example here is like the way we talk about fear and how we think about fear and how fear can kind of unconsciously guide so much of our like decisions and thoughts. And you guys will remember, I don't know if he was the first to say it like this, but like it was popularized by Tony Robbins. He would say, fear stands for false evidence appearing real. Okay, so on a mental level, that's probably pretty good. Like that doesn't, I don't think that covers every case of fear, obviously, on a physiological level and so on. You know all about that. But it's a good example in this context because it is like certain truths, or, here maybe more on the other side of that spectrum, you kind of have a presentation of like the way things seem to be, and then it's not, you learn actually that it's not actually the case. Like it's, not that your perceptions were wrong, but like more information can come in, like you have more access. So this is kind of what immediately prompted this, because earlier today I was editing a video that I recently recorded, and somehow like I was just in the middle of it, and I thought like I had lost like the first half of it, and I checked like I checked my data, I checked my files, and like, was there another, did I record, like, because I stopped it, did I record it in two pieces? I couldn't find it. And so I was just like preparing myself to have to like re record this. And then, of course, all it was just that I was just like still in the middle of the file, and I had somehow like forgot that I, you know, could still like move backwards and reach the beginning of the file. Super simple, right? But it took quite a while to get there because I really like went through the whole like where is the other file? Like I assumed it was missing. I assumed I forgot to record it. So fear is like a specific kind of projection, right? And it involves a set of assumptions. And then on this view of truth, it's like kind of like the information that comes in from reality to check you and say like, no, actually there's more here. There's more than this little framework of the assumptions that you were using. And so I'm not saying that this is like a thorough philosophical presentation of all the dimensions of fear, but I'm just using this as an example for talking about the ways in which truth appears within the conditions that are available and which allow for its appearance. That's interesting. Yeah, allow for its appearance. So it's just another reason not to like jump onto snap judgments, to kind of like withhold judgment. Like even over time, we can speak about seeing a pattern in a moment or a pattern over time. And even that, even a pattern is like a specific kind of appearance subject to certain constraints and conditions. So it's not even like it may give you some like aspects of a truth, but it's definitely still never the whole truth. And commonly like in a lot of like philosophical discussions, this is discussed in terms of like phenomenal appearance, but it's really important to understand that this is still true on a psychic level. So we also bring conditions in to any kind of like psychic reception that we have to like learn how to separate out. Again, still never really getting at some kind of like imaginary raw truth, but being able to discern like what it is that we are projecting and bringing in as a set of conditions for the way that a given truth can even present itself to us. So I think that a real takeaway here is really, you know, when something seems to really be a certain way and it just like, it really seems to be a certain way, kind of way, like it's you have this kind of conviction about it, or it seems very certain, or it seems very like there's this like strong kind of like element to the way that it's appearing for you. Like just try to dig into that and understand that more as like these are kind of qualities that you are bringing onto that experience or phenomenon or perception, which is not to say that they're going to be wrong. It's just to help you better recognize like the qualities of perception that you're also bringing, right? Because every perception is always already a projection, which again doesn't mean that it's wrong. This is like the way our brains work, right? So that's why truth in this sense is always like meeting us under certain conditions and constraints and like influences for the way that it can even show up. So we just have to learn to like discern that there is that quality here, and you know again just to like withhold our judgments like over time or over different kinds of data or over different kinds of projections that we have. But importantly, this is not skepticism. This is not saying that like truth is meaningless or truth doesn't exist or truth is like whatever you want it to be. This is not saying any of those things. I feel like all this really says is like instead of instead of like it's almost like taking a middle road between like confusion and clarity, like curiosity, right? Curiosity is very dialogical, it's very relational, and it's just like I feel like that's the approach that we have to take. So having curiosity about why something feels the way it does for you or appears the way it does for you, and just being able to even like question your own curiosity, like to question your own process of questioning. And that's kind of like where the truth lies, so to speak. So it's not about reaching necessarily a kind of certainty, but to be curious about your certainty because there's qualities in that that you bring. So I hope that helps, kind of like get you thinking in this area, maybe like loosen some assumptions or, you know, alleviate some kind of like, because sometimes this can feel very burdensome. But if you're in a situation like that and, you know, just like interrogate how you're feeling, right? Because it could be, there's definitely some fear that's at work in the background. And if things do feel kind of like really stuck, like if your perceptions are stuck, like if you keep perceiving it the same way and it keeps seeming the same way, you know, just try to like step back and loosen that and just to remember what I've said here about the way in which a thing will appear because of the certain conditions that are around it and like you're contributing to that in to a certain extent too. So just sit with that, think about that and like allow that to loosen for you and you know then you can like move around the proverbial like what do we have whatever we are looking at, you can see it from different sides, different angles, and even then you know there's more dimensions than that, right? So yeah, hope this helps and just keep this in mind. Okay, we'll talk soon.